Hi, I'm Francisco Alalong,
I'm Alex Hatcher.
I'm Alex Tanner.
and here we have the design of a resilient street pole. So in this project, what we learned is that traditionally street poles are mounted using bolts and nuts into the Earth's ground. And what the problem usually happens is that during an earthquake, the bolts experience a large amount of shear force that they become brittle and they break off. So they fall down in the event of an earthquake. What we would like to do is protect these poles from falling down so that cars or people like emergency personnel can travel freely, knowing that these are still standing up.
The bolts on the poles cannot be expanded due to the fact they need to break away in the case of car accident.
So we learned about different types of accelerometers. There's ones that output digital signals, ones that output analog signals, and ones that have different sensitivities. This one right here sends an analog output and has a sensitivity of 800 millivolts per G, which is sensitive enough to detect an earthquake of high magnitude, and also the ones that are not as big.
In this project, we learned about the Mercalli scale. The Mercalli scale uses G acceleration to measure earthquakes, and it's useful for determining local pressure of an earthquake. So this would allow, if we record data, engineers to analyze local structures to see how they fared. So if there's a house that collapsed, they could see what type of shaking led to how it collapsed. So the solenoids pop out when there's an earthquake. So this requires them to be push type solenoids to save energy. That way they're only using energy when they're out in an earthquake.
So we learned about the different types of solenoids. There's push types and pull types. Push types actuate when you send the voltage to it, it'll push out, and then the pull types, when you send the power to it, it'll retract in. And we ordered a push type, but got a pull type, ironically. Well, the biggest thing we learned about was EEPROM and how it's the flash memory on Arduino, and it basically takes one byte at a time. So when we're doing analog read function outputs an int, and we have to convert that to a byte, otherwise it can't read it. And so we learned how to use bit shifting operations, and we used the high byte and low byte functions to do the bit shifting for us because it was much easier. So we all met up a lot, and we thought of the solenoid idea together. And I know Francisco spent a lot of time actually getting the model down and doing some SolidWorks for us. I spent a lot of time doing the code and figuring out how to write the EEPROM and how to store data.
And I assisted with the code writing and debugging for the EEPROM and the solenoids.
And we all contributed equally to writing the report, and that's that.
So in my attempt of writing EEPROM I tried to use X, Y, and Z values as an array and store that into one address. But to my avail, it wasn't really successful until Alex here kind of told me just write one value to each address, and that's how we were able to use EEPROM.
So I learned that the transistor was heating up a lot during operation and when it was under the power, and we had to create a heat sink, otherwise the transistor was probably going to blow up, and that was a major problem for us.
And I learned that it's very important to mechanically anchor the hot wire from the large power supply. So during testing it at home, it kind of came out a little bit, and then it got very close to the junction between the Arduino and the wires, and it jumped from the live wire into the Arduino and blew up the Arduino and almost broke my computer. So then we ended up moving the Arduino to the bottom so we wouldn't do this again.
So one of the other things that we had to keep in mind was that since we wanted to mount this inside of the street pole, we wanted to make sure that none of the wires would touch each other because we're dealing with metal parts. So what we had to understand was that if these, like what Alex was saying, is that if these wires were to touch, the whole system would fail. So in the future, what we would probably suggest is that use insulated boxes or heat shrink wrap tubes.